deep research, and I wanted to find out, well, since I'm the Swedish champion in prompt recent research say, what type of techniques are actually helpful and what type of techniques are more akin to throwing salt over your shoulder or, knock on wood and stuff like that.
And what did you come to some conclusion? Could you see, some techniques that actually have a clear added value? Or?
Yeah, and I think the one that has the best clear added value is if you ask the model to always ask you question back. So here's the thing I would like to solve, but please ask me if you need clarification. Please ask me if there's any information missing. Please ask me the questions and the context that I have not provided to you.
Yeah.
And that was actually the one that seemed to give the most value. And then they had a little bit more uncertain results on stuff like, should you be polite or should you be like commanding? Well, sometimes politeness actually helps, but not for all type of questions. Sometimes being commanding helps, but not for all type of questions. It kind of evens out over a large set of different use cases.
It sounds like a proper research topic. Someone should do a proper research article about this and try to see, what the added value of different techniques are in some ways, right?
And prompting in very many different various contexts for coding or for papers. What is your what did you distill it down to yourself, like when you go into the deep research mode for prompting? How would you summarize what is deep research prompting, and in what way do you think that's slightly different in how you approach it than other prompting, or is it the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same. The thing is that, interesting enough, if you do a deep research, at least in ChatGPT, it has this kind of built-in function that it does ask you questions. So regardless of how specific you are and how much context you give for the original question, you will always get question back. So it's one of these kind of best practices that is apparently part of the mode of the program itself.
So it has basically the technique that you found the most useful is more or less built in when you go into deep research mode in ChatGPT. I don't know.
Can we summarize that? I see that too. Can we summarize that it's almost like in deep research mode, the machine goes more into a scientific mode. So it approaches you of deconstructing the question, so to speak. Is that a fair summary? That it's almost like approaching it like a scientist itself, like your question that you're asking it, how it's approaching you compared to when you the ChatGPT 4.0 can seem like a happy servant. Don't really ask, don't really care, you just blurb something back.
Yeah, you could kind of think of it that way. I mean, it asks a question that seems to convey that it needs like very detailed and nuanced understanding of the question. It's not just, you ask a question, here's some answer back. But really, are you thinking about it in this way or that way? Is it this angle or that angle? Should I focus on recent stuff or older stuff?
Mm-hmm. So a bit more interested in the objective truth, perhaps, if we call it that. And if you don't do the deep research mode or earlier versions of LLMs, they may simply just want to please you in some sense. That be?
I mean, I would be careful of using the word intent and aim and like preferences. At the end of the day, it's just the programming of the thing and the scaffolding of it. I mean, someone have made a design decision that for the mode deep research, we have put in the prompt that it should ask questions. It's not like an inherent desire of the model to.
No, it's a different scaffolding because it has a slightly different design.
I'm going to add this as a question. Does these kind of models have feelings and intent?
Oh, nice.
I think that could be an interesting topic towards the end when you get a bit more philosophical. Feelings and intent. You also mentioned your wife did some research as well, right? What was that about?
Yeah, right. So she's interested in local history, and we live in a neighborhood in a small village that has old houses. So we have quite a lot of local history to dig into. And she did a search using deep research where she asked what type of families and what have they worked with who have lived in our neighborhood for the last 200 years.
And what happened?
What happened was that she got first she got this kind of question back. Okay, what are you interested in? And she answered them. And then she got the report, and it looks kind of nice. But then she looked at the sources for the report. And the sources contained both public archive sort of thing. And then they had some more like blog posts or PDFs provided by the local history society. Hembygdsföreningen in Swedish, exactly. And then she had one of the sources that was Radio Islam. And she kind of reacted a bit. I've heard that before. I'm not quite sure about this source. And then, I mean, since you sit down with AI, you can just ask the AI, this Radio Islam thing, what is that? So apparently that was a very anti-Semitic local radio station that was on the air between, I think in the 80s, 90s something. And then they transformed their activity to a web page. And as ChatGPT itself claimed, it's one of the most anti-Semitic places on the internet in Sweden.
Is that so from ChatGPT?
It said so when you ask explicitly about that source.
This then sparks. This is the hook, the key point. That with deep research also comes, the guardrails. What other features do we need when we do deep research to also vet, so to speak, which sources to use and not use, or what was your thinking here, and what was your reflection in the end on this?
Yeah, I mean, my initial reflection, because I'm not a very big fan of anti-Semitism, of course, was that I felt uncomfortable. Then I went in and checked that in the report there was nothing anti-Semitic. It was just a very general description of people who have lived in our neighborhood. The specific factual claim that was collected from this webpage seemed to check out, because I could then kind of look it up and verify it from other sources as well. So that is, of course, an interesting philosophical and ethical question, that if you have a piece of information which is factual correct, should you still have that as part of one of these deep research searches?
Or should you filter out sources?
Yeah, exactly.
Even if the fact is correct.
Exactly. You should filter out stuff which is not correct, presumably. But you should not or it is a question if you should filter out the source as well.
So sources that are deemed to be anti-Semitic, for example, as ChatGPT said this source was, but they still use it as source for facts in some sense.
The funny thing is that the next question I asked to ChatGPT that, okay, that doesn't sound too good. Is that a usable source for stuff? No, absolutely not. You should never use this source. You cannot trust it. So
in this sense, then deep research finds sources, and it turns out that the facts that they are using in the report is correct. So all this is good, but even itself would not say we should not have this reference or this source in the report. Maybe.
I mean, this is of course a design decision from OpenAI. Either they could say that, well, I mean, there are several things you can argue here. You could, on the one hand, argue that if you have a page which has a very skewed political leaning, maybe you will on an average have a harder time finding unbiased and correct information from that page. So maybe it's just good practice to say that, well, maybe there are some facts here which are correct, but given that the percentage of those are low, we should not take the risk. That's one thing you can say.
That's a good one.
The second one is, of course, like the business model, both from an attention perspective, but also from a monetary perspective. Do we want to promote this type of sources in reports which can then be handed around and people can read it and say, okay, here's the source and here's the source, and I guess I should trust them on an equal basis because they are all in this kind of nice report.
Would you have been in favor of, if your name, I mean, I know you wouldn't be connected to this source, but if some name were to be connected in this source and it's being returned by ChatGPT, would you be okay with that reporting your political interests, for example?
If I would be okay to have my political interest being reported back by ChatGPT?
Yes, if I do deep research on ChatGPT, I'm asking about something from your local neighborhood, and I get your name back, and it also says, this person, Magnus, has these kind of political interests, for example.
I mean, on the one hand, given that I'm like a middle-aged white guy, I'm in the safest position ever to like, it's no worries. but I could find that it would be deeply problematic for like a more general part of the population. Yeah. It's like I would maybe not be that scared or that upset for a personal level, but like on a system level, I would find that very disturbing.
And it goes all the way into something we need to talk about later. It's about, are there topics in deep research that we should not allow people to do deep research on? Like, for instance, I want a detailed report on my neighbor's political leanings or whatever. Is that okay?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to GDPR, of course, and this kind of sensitive personal data that should be processed in a much more careful way.
So from a GDPR perspective, that should be impossible.
In Sweden.
Yeah. Anyway, so many interesting topics, and we're getting into rabbit hole very quickly. But before we go even deeper into the wonderful art of prompt engineering, I guess, let me first welcome you here, Magnus Gille. You're the product owner of AI Enablement, right, at Scania?
Yeah, that's right.
But even more so, the reigning Swedish champion of AI prompting. Is that the proper way to phrase it, or?
Yeah, I always stumble when I try to formulate what I should refer to myself in that context. But yeah, let's go for that one.
Yeah, awesome.
So we need to unpack what was the Swedish champion all about, and then we also need to unpack a little bit at some point, AI enablement at Scania, which is a very large place, and there are many people working with AI in Scania actually. So we can also think about in what context you are working with AI enablement. That would be fun to know a little bit about.
But before we go into the super interesting topic and then all get experts into prompt engineering, hopefully, may not, but try to at least. Let us know a bit more about you. Who is really Magnus? What's your background and how did you get into prompting, I guess, in the end?
Yeah, right. So Magnus Gille, I live in Mariefred and I have a family, 2 cats. Career-wise, I have been mostly spending time with big industrial Swedish companies. So I had a stint at Ericsson for 7 or 8 years. And now I've been with Scania for around 8 years. Right. I had an extremely short period at Northvolt as well, but that was very, very short. So,
well, good for you, I guess.
And I have some Scania friends that still there. Wherever it's going now, but yeah.
Cool. And you've been to Scania for some time, and perhaps you can just speak about your role currently at Scania as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So since a little bit more than half a year, I am a product owner for a team called AI Enablement. So my team is part of another organization where we are thinking very deeply about and trying to enable developers. So it's all about software developer enablement. We have a vision within our team that we would like to enable software developers to be 1,000 times faster if you measure from.
Times.
Yeah,
Jesus.
I mean, aim for the sky, no?
Organize for the trajectory. Let's talk about that.
Exactly. But I think the thing here is that when we say that in the context of what we want to enable is a software developer having a nice idea of something, writing that in code, deploying that code on either a real live vehicle in the rolling fleet or a virtual vehicle, have the virtual vehicle or the live vehicle render data from that experiment, of course in a safe and secure and over there software update manner, and then get that data back the very next day. Because that type of loop is currently in vehicle industry quite long. I mean, we're a heavily regulated industry. There are a lot of processes and guardrails and a lot of stuff that you need to do.
And to get a little bit more nuanced on Scania, which is a global truck manufacturing company in the transport ecosystem. So we can then talk about, I guess, we have the industrial system of Scania, and we have the commercial system of Scania. And industrial system of Scania, we have the supply chain, and we have then ultimately, as I assume now, R&D, which is a very strong, a very proud part of Scania, which is really, done so many amazing things in, thinking about modularity, thinking about, world-class combustion engines. So I assume you are a part of R&D, and you're looking at software development in relation very much to the truck and the ecosystem around the truck.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. So the scope here is software developers developing software both for applications that will be deployed on board the vehicles, so in embedded software, but also quite a lot of connectivity stuff that is deployed in the cloud.
Yeah, and then over-the-air updates. And I guess the whole automotive industry is going and talking more and more about the software-defined vehicle. Is this something that you've heard or relate to, software-defined vehicle, as part of this vision, why we need to be so good at software and doing it 1,000 times more effective?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's very much top of mind among me and my colleagues within Scania. We very recently went public that we have a collaboration with a company called Applied, who we will work together with to define and refine what we mean with software-defined vehicle.
Is it the Applied AI in Germany, or what company is this?
No, Applied Intuition. I think they're based in the US.
Okay.
So software-defined vehicle for someone who's not into automotive. I mean, like in one way, we saw it. The traditional automotive industry saw it with Tesla. You know, it is software on wheels, or was the joke? But could you elaborate on what do we mean with this in the automotive industry, and why is this a thing that is discussed quite heavily?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're kind of hitting the head of the nail there when you're referring to Tesla, because that was really the company that took this into automotive, this way of thinking about a vehicle. Because previously and historically, if you have bought, say, a car, you would expect that car to be the best it would ever be when you buy it, and then it would just degrade over time. The brakes would wear down, and the seats would be less comfortable and stuff like that. But if you're buying a new mobile phone, you're not really expecting that to be worse over time. Of course, I mean, there will be a new generation of hardware platform that will have more memory and stuff like that. But you're kind of expecting your phone to have new features and new applications and new stuff for you to do. You're expecting the value of that phone to rather kind of increase over time. And I think that this is one of the aspects and one way of thinking about software-defined vehicle, that you're buying this big and very expensive thing, but it's something that is an investment that might even increase in value, because the manufacturer will have the ability to create software, create and deploy new features, and do that on a kind of regular basis.
Yeah, and I think you can even push it further. So with AI and the productivity frontier increasing and the intelligence in our ecosystems, so we can't have assets that is at the level of intelligence of 2025 that has not been following to 2030. And the phone, I think, is a perfect example. What defines my personal phone is, yes, it's the hardware, but then it's the fundamental apps that I choose to use for me. If it's a Spotify app, if it's a weather app, or a stock app. So in the end, my smartphone is more than the hardware. It's what I decide to do with it.
Can you go a bit more into what do you actually do to enable software engineers in Scania?
Yeah, right. So if I zoom back from the big organization I sit in and the part of the organization, and I go back to my team, it's AI Enablement. So we do two things. First, we try to be kind of ambassadors of using AI, being an AI first developer and all what that means, trying out the new tools as soon as they become available for software development within the company, recommend kind of tools which are not currently available, that maybe we should have them available within the company, best practices and stuff like that. We're also building application that aims towards improving the life of software developers. And one concept that we talk quite a lot about within the organization, not only my team, but my part of the organization, is developer experience. So developer experience is this notion that has been quite popular in the general software industry, I guess. I mean, I'm sure you heard about it.
DX, yeah.
And you can define it in a few different ways, but the way that we define it is in a very general sense. So we're talking about developer experience, both when it comes to the tooling and really the tools being made available for the software developers. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they hard to use? We're talking about processes and methods and kind of how do you work on a day-to-day basis and stuff like that. We're talking about culture, like feedback. Is it easy to raise your opinions, and are you seen, are you heard, do you feel happy when you go to work? So it's quite broad topic that we want to capture. And the thing that we found was that it seems to be, at least if you look at the research and literature, this seems to be a very key concept. Companies that has high developer experience, they have happy employees, and that's great because then I get happy colleagues at work, so that's nice. But it also leads to measurable improvements in code quality and the speed which you can develop stuff. So it seems to be really a win-win situation here.
So improvements both in terms of speed and quality. In this
yes,
case.
Exactly. Good things all around. And how can you then measure it? Because if it's a good thing, you should probably try to measure it and understand it and see where you're at in the organization and see if you can take action to improve stuff where you need to improve it, or if you can continue to do things which are improving and promoting developer experience. The thing is that that's not so hard to do. You just go out and you sit down with developers and you ask them a bunch of questions and interview them about their daily life. But that's not a scalable solution, right? I mean, if we look at Scania and we look at Traton Group, we have hundreds or even thousands of developers. And my team is quite small. I don't have time to go out and sit and talk with people. So what we have done, this is all to say that a thing that we have built and that we're now deploying internally of Scania is a chatbot that you can configure to have a chat-based conversation of different aspects of developer experience. And it can be, I mean, it's very, it depends on context. Maybe you are in a team that is building a specific product and you want to you want to ask the user of your product how they feel about it. Maybe you are in a larger organization and you would like to have a discussion and evaluation of processes used within your organization, or like team spirit or any of those things. So we have constructed a tool that will help you in an automated way to configure a conversation that will focus on exactly the thing that makes most sense to you here and now. And then it will be generated by AI. You will have a link. You can send it out and share it with the developers. And they can engage in a chat-based conversation where they're being asked questions, kind of checking off, okay, we will have a conversation about processes. Tell me about which processes you're facing on a daily basis, which one are good, which one are bad.
I see.
So like
it's trying to measure and get some kind of sense of the current state of their experience. And
just so. And in a very scalable way, because this link I can then share with like 5 colleagues or 50.
Super interesting.
2 questions, 2 quite separate questions.
Yes.
Just to frame the scope. When you say software engineer, are we referring only, how do we understand software engineering, data engineering, AI, machine learning engineering? Is it an engineering experience, or are you only catering to one subset of engineers that is working now in the digital space, so to speak?
All right. I see the product as catering to a very wide definition of software engineers. I mean, all of the things that you said and probably more roles is stuff and roles I would put into software engineering. If you're working with software engineering in a big enterprise such as Scania, there are of course a lot of different roles being involved, and many of these never even touch code because you have like project managers and you have Scrum Masters, product owners, different type of roles associated with different type of agile and lean implementation of different processes. So all of these, I would say, are also kind of in the scope of software development as a...
So maybe we should talk about this then as the end-to-end team product, the product team. And the product team has a 360-degree view of engineering and roles in relation to what problem they're solving. So sometimes...
Well, should we go down this rabbit hole? I'm thinking we should go to the main theme here soon. I think we can get stuck here for an hour.
Yeah, you can.
Speaking about, like software engineering and AI enablement for that. And I think it's a super interesting topic. But actually, I do think, so many people, including myself, is here to hear more about your prompt engineering expertise. And perhaps you can just start to give a bit more intro to how did you get interested in prompt engineering?
Thanks, Anders.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, sometimes when I talk to people about AI, they will proudly proclaim that I've been working with AI before it was a thing. I've already done this thing for 10 or 20 years. And sadly, I cannot claim that long history working with generative AI or AI more broadly. But I mean, I, along with almost everyone else in the world, got very interested when ChatGPT was released. So that was 3 years ago now, 2.5?
2022, right?
Yeah. And at that point, I started to use the tool, and it had a lot of limitations. But the thing was that some people saw these limitations and said, I tried this thing and it didn't work. So I gave up, and I think the tool sucks and generative AI will never become anything. Yeah. And me, I'm very stubborn, or maybe I'm not so certain in myself, because I always felt maybe it's a me problem. Maybe I'm just not phrasing this in the correct way that can help the AI solve the problem for me. So I did a lot of thinking and a lot of experimenting. A lot of it failed, of course, because the early models were not that good, quite frankly.
Yeah. And it's okay. So you get started back in 2.5 years ago, and you could see that it was hard to make them work properly at that time.
Yeah.
Is that when you tried to see how you could improve your own techniques, so to speak, to make it work more properly?
Yeah, exactly. And I tried to read up on what type of things actually work. And I mean, at that point in time, you had all of these techniques. Some of them were actually helpful, and some of them were maybe a little bit of just superstition. So one of the things that was popular to do was to introduce this kind of chain of thought thinking, that you ask a question, but in the prompt you ask the AI to think it through. You will have to think it through step by step, and then you will report back each step, and then you will reflect on that before saying the next thing.
And it worked really well, I guess, even back then to try to do that. Or?
It worked. I mean, really well is maybe probably.
Okay, and then you continued, and I'm very eager to go into how the actual championship worked and how you got into that. But if you were, before we go there, to just reflect a bit more about how if we take ChatGPT, which I think you specialize in,
yes,
how has that evolved since 2022, you would say?
Oh, it has been immensely. I mean, I remember specifically the step between when they released GPT-4 as a model compared to GPT 3.5. And things that was not possible before all of a sudden kind of just get solved of itself. Yeah. Or a lot of kind of prompt engineering tricks that I could just forget about because the models were getting that good. Yeah.
I mean, the 4 version was a big leap, right?
Which one was the biggest leap, in your opinion, since you started doing it? I guess we're starting from 3.5, right?
Yeah.
So which one do you think has been the biggest leap so far?
I think 4 was for me the biggest wow factor, because 4 was the one that made things possible that was not possible before. I remember that when I toyed around with 3.5, it was always this, where is the trajectory here? Is this as good as they will get? And maybe the capabilities and the functions will kind of flat out, so it will be more gradual improvements. Or will it really become dramatically better with every new model that they release?
And then they had a 4.0 as well coming in, a more omni version, a multimodal version coming in. Did that make you excited, or were you more interested in the text domain, so to speak?
I think 4.0, when they introduced that one, introduced chain of thought into the model, right? That was a reasoning model, or
I think
was it
the
0.1?
The image version, the Omni. So they added image understanding, if I'm not mistaken.
You mean the recent one released now?
No, the 4.0, which is like at least a year ago.
But the O, I think, was the Omni, so sort of multimodal. Yeah. And now the recent one is 4.5, I guess. Yeah. Which is more than reasoning, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so many things have happened there, and it's exciting to see. But let's perhaps move into the championship. And I think a lot of people don't even know that it did exist. Can you just give a bit of a backdrop to how did you get in contact with the prompt Swedish Championship.
Yeah, right. I mean, this was back in November last year. I had no idea that there was such a thing as a prompt championship. I got a message over Teams from a colleague who said that, oh, look, here's a prompt championship. Since you work with AI enablement, maybe that's something that would be interesting to compete in. And I thought to myself, you cannot compete in prompting. This doesn't make sense at all. But then I thought a bit more and said, okay, I can give it a try. So I clicked the link, and you were taken to a web page where you were tasked with doing, I think, 1 or 2 assignments. So this was the trials that was publicly available to anyone who clicked that link.
Some qualification.
Exactly.
Right now.
More specifically, what was the assignments and what did you do that sort of obviously then cut you into the championship?
Let's see if I remember these assignments. I mean, the assignments were of the nature that here is a scenario. Here's a thing that you need to do. And the task is to write a prompt that will, when given to an AI, give you help with doing that. If I remember correctly, one of the things was that you were applying for work and you were called to an interview, but before the interview, you would like to have like a rehearsal with an AI. So you should prompt the AI to interview you for a specific work. And then at the end of this kind of conversation, it should summarize the good thing and the bad thing and what you should improve for the real interview then.
So did you basically send like a transcript of the conversation you had, or how did you?
No, that's the thing. I mean, the thing you submitted was the prompt. So not the result, not the output, but the prompt was the thing that, yes.
So no refinements or?
Yeah, I mean, you could refine as much as you like, because in that web page you had access to Gemini. So you could write your prompt and you could try it. And then you could see what was the result of the prompt. And then you could iterate on the prompt until you were happy, and then you could send it in.
Okay, awesome. And then you qualified basically, and you came to was it the finals or what was it called?
Yeah, then it was the finals. So I got a mail just before Christmas, really nice early Christmas gift from a lady working at Google saying that, okay, you're part of the final. We're happy if you can join us. And I was, of course, very happy to join them. So the finals was in the beginning of February, I think, in Google's office.
Yeah. And this is organized by Google for people that didn't know that.
Yes, Google and also Digital idag, which is part of the Swedish Post och telestyrelsen, so Swedish Postal and Telecommunication Department.
And was it more or less organized? How was it organized? Was it like a hackathon where you all showed up and you had to complete within the finals? How many was in the finals? All this?
Yeah, right. Okay, so I showed up. I met with the other finalists. 20 in total. Okay. And we were given 3 assignment, and I mean the setup of the room was that we had our own little laptop and we were seated around a big table, U-shaped table, and there we got to work on the final assignments.
A single one or multiple ones?
It was 3 of them.
3?
Yep.
Can you give an example of what the questions was or the assignments was?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. The first one was that the scenario was that you're supposed to give a presentation on space in a big public venue, and it should be easily accessible by people, because in the audience you have both technical and non-technical people who know about space. It's also broadcasted, and now you need to prepare for this occasion. So write a prompt that will tell the AI how to prepare for this.
Awesome. And what was your thinking here? If you go a bit more into how you are thinking to create an awesome prompt.
Yes.
What was your thinking there?
Yeah, right. So the first thing I always do when I face a problem is that I reach for an AI. So part of the competition was that we were allowed to have the public version not logged in by different AI tools. So we could have like ChatGPT or Grok was not released, but Gemini. So that was fair game.
Okay.
And a thing here that I maybe didn't mention is that it was quite tight time constraint. So we had like 10 minutes per assignment. And if you have 10 minutes, it's not very much. Time flies, especially if you sit and you're really focused. So the first thing I do is reach for one of the AI tools. I just copy paste the assignment and say, help me write a prompt. That's the first thing.
Okay, so you tried that first. Simply.
Yes.
Okay. And what do you do then? So
Right.
Please elaborate.
And then I get the prompt. The prompt was a little bit too long. We had a constraint on number of characters as well. So I had to ask the helpful AI to make the prompt shorter. And after that, I had something that I could like manually iterate on, because I knew that there were some things missing that I prefer to have in my prompt, so I could add them.
So basically, it's kind of meta prompting. You were asking the ChatGPT to help you with the prompting itself.
Yes.
And what was the vision of you and the ChatGPT in relation to what the solution is? In the end, the prompt that you created, that you sent in, what did it do? What did it render?
Yeah, right. So the thing it rendered, I mean, I used a few techniques which are kind of best practices, like provide a persona to the prompt. So for the space presentation, I wanted the AI to adapt the persona of a well-known physicist and also a very good public communicator. And then I added a lot of other contextual stuff that would probably help out as well.
And I guess that is important, right? To be very specific and have a clear context.
Yes, context is very important.
How do you do it in that case? If you just try to give some example, how do you do it for the space presentation?
Yeah, like for space presentation, I mean, it's helpful context that it's an international presentation, so it needs to be in English. So I added specifically that you need to give me advice that is helpful in English. Since it's a big venue, there's a lot of people. I asked for advice that would help me with how to move on stage and how to kind of handle stress and how to act in front of such a big audience. I think I mentioned that it's streamed as well. So what should I think about microphone and cameras and stuff like that?
So in the end here is also about really good prompting is the more context you can give about what is the feeling, what is the experience, what is the risks, what is the stress, all this in the end helps a sharp prompt to give you something that is useful in that moment, in that context. Is that a sort of simple advice?
Yeah, context is king.
Context is king.
Simply.
Yeah.
So besides persona and context, anything else that you would recommend people to think about when creating their prompt?
Yeah, I have one that I have been recommending now when I have talked with people after the finals. And this is the one that people usually say, oh, I tried it. And that was actually really, really helpful. And that is that it's often helpful to ask the AI to ask you questions back. I mean, ask for clarification, ask for things that is missing. That is something which is usually very helpful.
That sounds great. Some people are here saying, you should also provide what output format it should be. Is that something that you think is important or is not necessary? Or
that can help. I mean, many of the prompt techniques is like this. Some of the prompt techniques is to get a more factual correct prompt. Many of the prompt techniques is to get an answer in a format that is suitable to you and your preferences. So providing example how it should look like in the format output might help a little bit for like factual correctness, but I think it helps a lot for how you perceive the answer. I've talked to people quite a lot who complain about, I don't really like these type of tools because they give too long answers. And it's like, yeah, you can just tell them just to give a short answer and then.
What about providing like examples? Is that useful? Like giving first a number of examples and then asking it to do something similar? Is that a good way to tell it how to provide the output?
Yeah, sure. That is probably a very helpful way. I mean, maybe it strikes me as a little bit overkill if you're like just a normal person who would like to ask a simple question. To sit down and come up with like example of good example, bad example might be a little bit overkill for that specific scenario. But it's very helpful if you're like building applications on it and need it to be behaving in a certain way.
Was there any of the assignments that were more prompting for software engineering versus the first one is a prompt in the context of presentation? Was there any one of these assignments that was more engineering oriented prompting?
No, it was not, and I think that was kind of by design because the way I understand it is that one of the triggers for hosting this competition in the first place was an observation that Swedish population in general seems to be a little bit adverse on using AI and AI tools compared to other countries. And this was something that was talked a little bit about from people from Post- och telestyrelsen who was there. And they said that, this might be a problem. So maybe we can do something to promote prompting among the more maybe non-technical part of the population, just to raise awareness. So I think that was one of the reasons that the assignments were kind of non-tech, not really super technical, but more general. Help me do this.
Showing for normal people that it works.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is a side note, but I went to, they had an AI day at Svenska Handelskammaren where Google were presenting, or they were part of commissioning a report on exactly this topic. If I'm not mistaken, that was almost like 1 month or very close around the time where the national championship was. So the whole idea, Google actually made a report quite around the same time, pinpointing that we are apparently more adverse to using these tools than other Europe.
In Swedish, yeah.
Yeah. For some reason.
Yeah, strange. Yeah, but we have something to improve here. Okay, can you just elaborate a bit more? What this was the first assignment that you got, some kind of space presentation. What were the others?
Let's see. The second one was once again applying for a job. So this time it was a more high-stake job. You're in a big organization and you want this like chief of innovation or something, and you should prepare for the job, and please write a prompt that can help you do that.
Cool. And the final one?
And the final one was come up with a very tricky subject that you would like to explain to someone, and ask the AI to explain that thing to that person.
So you decide a topic, and
yes.
What did you choose?
That was easy, because before the competition, I mean, apparently Google were quite good at sending out press releases, because I got a little bit of attention from like local media. So SVT Sörmland was home and did an interview with me. And very often I found myself answering the question, what is prompting? So like on really on that basic level. So that was the topic I chose to help to explain.
What is prompting?
Prompting is simply the words that you say to an AI in order to make it do something, help you or engage in a conversation.
Awesome. Perhaps you could, you won the competition. Did you get some kind of motivation, or why do you think you ended up as a champion?
Right. The way the competition was judged, I understand, is that the prompts were judged by a human jury. So that was the setup. And I mean, there's an interesting thing here that I used an AI to create a prompt, which was then read and judged by a human. I mean, it feels a little bit.
They could do it at Eurovision, that you have the jury and then you have the phone votes. You could have the chat. It would have been fun to have an AI judge as well.
But I mean, what I did before the competition was just since it's for Google who made the competition, they have of course a prompting guide. I read the prompting guide. I did the best practices from that one. I tried to add a little bit of like personal color and like things in the prompts that would make them more fun to read for a jury. So a little bit of jury.
So how did you mean? How did you do that?
That's good fun. What's the strategy here to win? Elaborate more.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I had, let's see, for the first one, I wanted to have one of these very dry pappa-skämt, so dad jokes as part of the presentation. So I explicitly put that in the prompt.
Like dad jokes, give an example so I understand.
Okay. Like, I mean, a dad joke is something that I use to tease my daughters. It's one of these very, very dry wordplay thing. Let's see, very hard to come up with something on the spot in English.
Actually, it's funny. Dad jokes translates in Swedish almost like a Gothenburg Witz.
Yeah. Okay, I remember one because I remember now because I have configured my ChatGPT to generate one of these jokes every day. So I have a daily dose of AI generated humor in my life. I mean, like,
jokes.
why did the skeleton run away from the fight? Oh, it had no guts. Stuff like exactly. You should be a little bit. You should laugh and feel a little bit embarrassed that you laugh at the joke.
That's Vits. That's ordvits in Sweden. It's so funny. I grew up on the West Coast, and we love our ordvits. And then you move to Stockholm, and it's frowned upon. Oh, this is so low. Joking.
I live on the wrong side of the counter, apparently.
You do, actually. You do.
Yeah. I mean, so you won the championship and you got a lot of attention, and congrats for winning it. Well done, of course. Is this something that you feel you have use for in your work as well today, to have this kind of skill? I guess you have prepped a lot, before coming to the finals in February. Or how did you prep for it?
I did not prep at all. No, I didn't. Oh. And I mean, when I went to the competition, I did not have the notion that I could win it. I actually had a meeting booked. The competition was on a Friday, and I had one of these kind of semi-important meeting at work, and it was a lot of managers, and the only time that you can find place in managers' schedule is kind of weird hours. So Friday evening, 5 o'clock, good. Then I will go and have the meeting. The program ends at 4 o'clock here. So I would just go there, do the competition, and then kind of slide out the door. That didn't quite work. But I mean, in all honestness, when it comes to like prompting skills, I don't think that I have that much better prompting skills than many of my colleagues within Scania, and for sure many of the people working with AI more generally in Sweden and Stockholm area. So the skills themselves are pretty much the same as they were before the competition. The what do you call it? Uppmärksamheten. Attention, yeah. Exactly. The attention, both internal from the company and external, has been interesting.
Yeah, elaborate.
Yeah, right. So like in Scania, we have made available ChatGPT Enterprise recently.
Yep.
And this is not part of my organization, so I have no part to play in making.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah. And many part of the organization have said that, we tried it a bit, but we don't quite understand it. So if only somebody could come and explain how you use this thing, and then, Magnus knows prompting.
He should know.
Yeah.
I have a little bit deeper question on prompting techniques. I'm not sure, but I would like to elaborate on it together. Can we see some fundamental differences in tactics or techniques for the different, categories of problems? And let me put up the categories. So if we are prompting for coding, what is good practice, or how should you think when you try to use it to debug or to build something, or even a prototype with Lovable? And then we have the sort of the presentation, the report, or even the presentation on stage. So are there differences here in how we are prompting? And we could stop at those two fundamental categories, because I think then from that one you can then get into the next level of copywriting, marketing, and stuff like that. But just the way I use it a lot with reporting, presentations, versus coding. What's the big difference in how to think?
Well, what categories do you see that potentially are different techniques for?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with coding and more general presentation. And yes, I think they will differ a bit, because when it comes to coding, you have a more, like, the nature of programming languages is that they have a correct syntax that you need to adhere to. If you deviate from that syntax, you will have errors and bugs, and it's like something that needs to be fixed. Often, if you have like errors and bugs, you may have both the code and some type of error output that you can then use to, here is the code, here's the error output, and it's kind of obvious what needs to be done for the model. When it comes to presentation, I think, given that natural language is much more nuanced and complex, you need to add a lot more context. I mean, if it were in the programming domain, it's kind of obvious. Here's some code, here's an error message. Okay, you need to adjust the code to make the error message go away. Easy. But
do you do like me for coding, that you simply provide a context and then say, please fix or please explain? Or what's your normal prompt in coding?
Yeah, in coding and more general for IT support, it's just not that much context needed. I mean, sometimes I just do a screenshot of my screen and just put that picture and say help.
Yes, a single word.
Single word, help.
Yeah. But
fantastic.
But when it comes to more like natural language, then you need more nuance, and you need to understand like what is the purpose of this text. Should it be long? Should it be short? Should it be to the point? Who should read it? With what type of glasses should the AI, so to say, put on when it's giving you feedback on the text?
Okay, so you can see that you need more context at least, and perhaps personas, and perhaps the ask for question kind of tip and output ideas, etc. for presentations. But I guess also you can think of different things like more like reasoning tasks. Have you gotten into more kind of reasoning type of prompting as well in some way?
Yeah, for the longest time I had like my own personal benchmark that I like to try on new models.
Yeah.
Because jumping all the way back to when ChatGPT was new, you had ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 3.5, right? And one of the things that was commented upon did not work quite well then was this classical riddle of, let's see, it's a farmer, it's a goat, it's a sheep, and you have a piece of cabbage. And the farmer comes to a river and there's a boat. And in the boat, the farmer can only take himself and one of these things to cross the river. How do you cross the river? And then in addition, the farmer cannot leave the sheep with the wolf because the wolf will then eat the sheep. And it cannot leave the goat, the sheep with the cabbage because same thing, the sheep will eat the cabbage. How do you get all of the three over the river given that you can just have one in the boat at the same time? So this is called the river crossing problem. It's very old. I think it has been described in medieval times in paintings and stuff like that. And early version of ChatGPT could not solve this problem. It could give a text that if you just skimmed through it looked like reasonable. But then when you read through step by step, like the things are kind of popping over and all of a sudden there are two sheep and then he's leaving the wolf and then it's like you take all of them in the boat and it was obvious.
Bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hallucinating.
Happy bullshitting and then be happy with, and now we have the answer. So that was one thing, but that was solved quite fast by GPT-4. So I come up with, maybe you can disguise this problem. You can, instead of talking about a farmer, you can talk about a father. And instead of talking about a wolf and a piece of cabbage and a goat, you can talk about, I have 3 kids. But I cannot leave 2 of the kids together because then they will hack my computer and don't like them doing that. And I can't leave the other 2 together because then they will steal candy from the cupboard. And now I need to go to work and I want to take all of the kids to work. But how can I do it? My car is so small, I can only take one at a time. So that functionally, it's exactly the same problem. But it's not obvious that the model should or could understand that it's the same thing.
So I guess you're saying that the abstract reasoning is rather poor, but if you do provide a context that is known to the model, that is seen at least the what happens with kids, but it haven't seen with goats.
Yes.
Then it actually can find a solution because it can at least recall some kind of similar kind of notions from model.
And that was true for a short time at least, because now all of the state-of-the-art models can solve that problem without an issue, and it can identify, I see that you're trying to ask me the river crossing problem.
Really? He can even see the underlying...
yes.
He's calling your bluff even.
Exactly.
Okay, so with these kind of reasoning models now, like O1 and O3, and we have DeepSeek R1 and all the Geminis and the Claudes are all using reasoning extra techniques, so to speak, in the models that they have today. Do you adapt your prompting techniques for them in some way?
No, I mean, I maybe dial back on the extra thing I used to do before, and I do less of them. But I still find that it's helpful to articulate myself as specific as possible. It's still helpful to provide as much context as possible. The provide a persona, I don't do that all of the time anymore. I feel like as long as I have a clear context and a clear expectation on the answer and can say that answer in this way, please, then that's usually take me all of the way.
I'm curious. I want to learn from myself. Like I use a lot of stuff when I want to do a report or research. And from my point of view, I'm not really interested in the facts of what I can find on the internet, so to speak. I have a novel idea that I want to convey. So 9 times out of 10, I get almost frustrated when hey, I want to help with the report and it's going to be about this. And it starts jabbering away on the solution. Hold on a bit. I want to load my fundamental ideas in here and I want you to improve on it. I want you to sharpen it. I want you to find the holes and I want you to find a much better communication. This is how I try to do it because I really believe in my own IP, so to speak. So how do you work then when you actually, I'm not here for the sort of, I'm here to convey my idea and my message, but I know I'm not as good as communicator.
Perhaps we should try it out because Goran can actually potentially start writing something. And if you were to try, what would be your first prompt? And then together with Magnus, perhaps we can try to improve it a bit.
Nice.
Define a task.
Let's prepare for the Data Innovation Summit keynote.
Yeah, perfect. So what would be your first prompt, Henrik?
So the way I work, I started to chat with my, I don't write, I chat, I talk to it. So literally I put on the microphone and I tell them and I talk to it. And then I basically start with context and framing what this is all about. And then so let's do it.
So what, but in this case, if you...
Put it on the microphone.
Okay.
It's going to be faster. Yeah, like this.
Let's see if it's going to work. Yeah. I think it's going to work.
Cool. Hi. Okay. Just a second. Yes. First one. Go, Henrik.
Okay. Can he hear me? I'll put on the... Okay, so I would like help with preparing for a keynote presentation on embracing data and AI to unlock the transformative power and values. And then he didn't hear me, so.
All right, let's try again.
Hi, I would like help to prepare a keynote presentation on how we embrace AI to unlock the transformative power of it. Can you help me? No, it's something.
Hejsan! Jag är redo att sätta igång direkt. Bara berätta vad du vill att jag ska fokusera på först.
All right, I would like to help to prepare a keynote presentation to embrace AI to unlock the transformative power in enterprise. But I like me to provide the core intellectual property and ideas, and I like you to organize it in the best possible way for a keynote presentation of 15 minutes. So this is okay.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't, because I usually talk to it and then I transcribe it and then I look at if the transcription is kind of okay and then I push send, right? Then so we go back and forth like that. And the only way
Hello, ChatGPT. It can't hear us. You have to write instead.
I think it's too far away from.
No, it's not. It's the setup and everything.
But let's write it instead. It's fine.
So I would. So it's okay, but maybe we can talk about it instead. So I would basically go in and frame the background and what am I frame my objective and my background very shortly, as short as I can, and I would then look. First of all, don't start immediately. I want to lay out the context and some ideas. Is that okay? Okay, shoot. I do a very, very, very conversational style where the problem is when it's jumping ahead too fast in solution mode, where I kind of want you, have you understood me? Do you understand the task? This is how I do it. I'm not sure if it's a good way or if it can be done better.
No, it sounds like a good way. I had a guy telling me that what he likes to do is begin with the prompt, now I want you to listen, and the only thing that you should do is answer for everything I say.
So I know.
I heard that.
I like that because this is actually a problem because I don't say that first prompt.
Yeah.
So then we are not in sync.
No, it tries to be helpful. It wants to give you, here's a bullet list, here's a thing. Think about that. Like, chill. You need to listen.
Chill. I have the content, not you.
Exactly.
I want you to give me the format and the dad joke.
Yeah.
That fits. Yeah. I like that. That simple topic is a little bit like frame very fast how you want to interact. How would you want the interaction to play out even?
Yes.
As an original prompt.
Exactly. And in the beginning of your conversation there, it seems like you have a lot to say, but you don't want any input. So just ask it to give you no input at all. Just whenever it has like registered that you have said something. And then you can talk, and you can change your mind, and you can go back and forward. And then at some point in time, you can kind of pause and then now summarize everything we have said. What is it coherent? What is the big glaring thing that we're missing? That is how I would do it, I think.
Yeah, let's continue. This is very helpful, and this is a good example. I mean, like another thing I also always do is how do I build up a red thread, and how do I build up a story? I mean, like the classical rhetorical, like this. So, should we do a Jeff Bezos memo out of this, or So let me. So the first thing I want to do this. I want this to do. But let's also think about the structure of this presentation. I haven't even gone to content yet. But also sometimes either I do it before, I do it after. The fundamental flow of the saga of the story, so to speak. Do you do that, or how do you do that? This is typical when you do like a 15-minute keynote.
Oh, I don't think I have used AI actually to kind of invent the red thread. That is something that when I do that type of presentation, I have the red thread in my head already. But that's good. I should use AI more to kind of help me and evaluate if the thing I had in mind is helpful, or if there are other stories I could bring in that was kind of fitting to the context.
So we've been working quite successfully in order to break down a good narrative. I mean, like there are many different techniques, but if we talk about what's the, we use like we use a way to discuss this at Darax. Okay, so what is the opening, or what is the prologue? What is the first plot point? What is the second plot point? What is the twist? What is the climax? Like how you build a movie, so to speak. You have a story, you have a problem, you have a struggle. To build something that is sort of narratively appealing. So those kind of things, I find it can be quite useful to. I know I have a key message, but how should I relate that key message over 15 minutes that is most impactful? So is it a red thread? Kind of. It's like going from a content or something you want to say to what's the theme, how do I say it so it becomes very hooking, so to speak. That's how I use it sometimes. We have an idea, but then I find that it's brilliant, of course, to how you build a movie, how you build a story, how you build a fiction, and gives you ideas. Then start in this angle and go left or right first, and then you take the hook.
Okay, so if you were to do some similar kind of task like this, how would you start? If you just talk about it briefly, if you were to prepare a presentation at Scania, for example, what would be the first thing that you did?
All right, the first thing I would do is have this kind of brain dump of everything that I have in my head right now. Either I have like a very articulate vision of what I want to say and in which order it should come, and then I can more or less like have the whole presentation just as is. Or I can have more, I should talk about this and I should talk about the other. No, I changed my mind. I want to do this instead. So kind of have a brain dump of everything where my head is at right now.
Would you upload like a presentation as well and use files to get some kind of context? Or?
That's the thing. I mean, since these tools are now so multimodal, like I can use anything. I mean, I can have like a stream of conscious just conversation with the thing, as we discussed before. If I have images that I like, I just put in the images. Why not? If I had any documentation, I read this research article and that's kind of nice, so let's put that one in as well. I mean, you could even put in source code. Here's a thing I coded, or a product that I'm working on, and here is like part of that might be helpful. Or if you have like test cases or anything. I mean, all of the things that we mentioned, it's just modes of expressing an ID. You can express it in language or in images or in code or presumably in music. And if I can put all of that in as context, I think it is helpful context. Well, not music yet, but...
Maybe at some point. But I guess, okay, so putting a lot of context in there, perhaps in a more or less random order, and then starting to iterate a number of times to get some kind of...
Yeah. I mean, it all depends. If the context I have is in kind of random order, then I just put it in a random order, and that's fine. If the context I have is really, well, I have the presentation because I held it before, I just need to refine it, then I put in the more clear presentation. So you can do like anything.
So I think the key word here is to start from where you're at. So you don't want to go back. If you have matured on a topic and you want to now do the next level, it's really stupid to go way back, because then you feel frustrated. Well, I'm already smarter than this. This is not helpful. So the core message here is like, do a brain dump to the best of your ability where your thinking is at. Yes. I think that's the core message here.
See, the time is flying by, and perhaps it is time for a short break.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
So we have this kind of break in the middle of the podcast to just reflect on some of the recent news that we heard about AI in recent times. And we try to keep it short, like 3, 4, 5 minutes. We usually fail, but...
3, 4, 5 minutes has never happened. Come on, that was a joke.
Per person, though. I don't know. But let's start. And of course, the guest Magnus, do you have any news that you'd like to share?
Oh, yes. I recently read a research paper that was kind of trending on X on Twitter. And it was from a research organization called METR. And
METR.
METR, exactly. And what they have done was that they had investigated what type of task AI have the ability to solve, and they expressed that type of task in how long would it take a human being to solve this task. And then they plotted how this has evolved over time, beginning with GPT-1, which could solve... exactly. Here we have the paper on screen. They started with GPT-2, claiming that, well, the type of task which GPT-2 could solve is more or less something that will take a human a few seconds. It's kind of stringing together a few words to have a grammatical correct sentence.
A spell checking more
or less.
Yeah.
And then it evolves over time. But as you can see, the scale here is not linear. The scale here is logarithmic, meaning that it will double this time every 7 months. And if you double a few seconds, it doesn't really matter so much. But if you continue to do this over time, you will quite soon go into time spans which are quite long. So right now we seem to be at the domain that Sonnet 3.7 can do stuff that would take a human being an hour. And give that a few more years, and we're up to months worth of...
not in years.
So 7 months.
Logarithmically 7 months. Okay, right. A couple of years. Doubles, But I use this. This is one of my key... when I found this report, I showed it immediately to Mikael, who is our head of research, like, dude, this is really the best way we have to explain what we mean with organized for the trajectory. I used a Sam Altman quote before I found this report where he said like the same thing. 3.5 was good for seconds. 4.0 is good for minutes. What is ChatGPT next is hours. And then if you keep doubling that, you really get to, it gives you a way of thinking, in my opinion, on don't organize for AI here and now. Think about what happens when the complexity or the abstraction level we humans will work on shifts. I think it's massive.
And also that some people think AI have hit a wall or something, but that's certainly not the case if you look at this kind of scale.
No, right? Logarithmic is quite profound. Doubling is quite big, yeah?
And then, of course, it's a question, will it continue to do this? I mean, I think so. And if so, that will have quite...
big ramifications, for sure.
Yes.
But this is a deeper topic, because you can argue if everybody stays the same and we just think it's the scaling laws that will double this, maybe not. But we all know the real researchers working on this, they're working on all kinds of problems. The reasoning problem, the scaling problem. You go to Jan LeCun, he's working on, we need something else. We need the next level of this. And of course, we're all working on this. And this is trickling down into what we see. So I think it will continue.
Yeah, of course.
I think it will continue. I don't see it. I'm not sure it's going to go much faster. I think 7 months doubling is quite.
It could go even faster potentially.
Yeah, maybe then you when you reach a certain breaking point.
I think it's interesting to just ponder about the benchmark that we do have. They get saturated at some time, and they get close to 99%. And even if when they exceed the human capabilities, it's really hard for a human to say how much better it is.
Exactly.
Because you can't really tell as a human. So you need another AI potentially to judge.
This was Hagai's comment.
Yeah.
That
I'm in a really cool paper, and
but it's a really cool way of communicating what is going on to normal people, so you can relate it. This is what I like. Why did you like it? Why did you want to push this report?
No, exactly. I mean, the kind of very simple visual representation of how fast things are going now. I mean, you can have these anecdotes on, I could not do this on ChatGPT 3.5, and now I can do it on 4, and that was just a year. But to see all of the models kind of just laid out in this kind of nice, neat line, and then the scale that goes from like seconds to minutes, from minutes to hours, from hours then presumably to days or months.
And even if it's really hard I like the fact that they've been trying to relate it back to a benchmark that has to do with us as humans. That makes it so much more relatable. But you can dig into this. What is the task? So we are measuring complexity of tasks. I'm not sure.
It also gets back to what we usually say, that AI progresses in exponential scale, and this is actually exactly what this is showing. And the law of accelerating returns, from Kurzweil, etc. So it's exactly saying what we have said for the last 5 years.
This is the reason why we started the pod. We need to demystify AI because we need people to start thinking about the trajectory.
Yes.
I'm not worried about the fucking shit we're having here and now. I'm worrying what happens when half the society is not on the trajectory even. With an logarithmic scale, you will never catch up. And then we will not have a diverse, inclusive society. We will have a divided society.
And we will have a lot of power concentrated on the people who are on the top side of the scale.
Yes, and that has never been good.
No.
Okay, cool. Henrik, do you have any news?
I don't want to dilute his message. No.
Okay.
I think this is the best news in a long time. Awesome comment.
I had just have a boring, some new model coming up, which they do every week. But, this time it was Gemini, and it was the version 2.5. I thought it was actually really big, and I always had a big faith in Gemini. It's never been really realized, so I've been disappointed for a long time, I think. But I think this time it really is getting further and further ahead. If you look at the LM arena, the chatbot arena, it's really a big step ahead of anything else. So if you compare it, I think the top three now, of course, Gemini 2.5 is far ahead of anyone else. And the chatbot arena is basically when humans doing blind tests, trying to see which answer is the best without knowing which model they actually are reviewing. So it is significantly better than anything else. And then the second part is Grok, I believe, still. And then I think I have to double check here. The fourth one is GPT 4.5, so that's OpenAI. So OpenAI is on the third place. And then it's a lot of Gemini models after that. But Grok, they were taking this place like a month ago when they released Grok 3. And now Gemini is taking it back with a big leap. And that's kind of interesting. And of course, they also beat a lot of other scores and benchmarks in reasoning and in math and different other metrics that we've seen. What I found potentially even more interesting, it's kind of sad because they didn't say anything how it works. And that's sad. They are very scared, and we know they're super scared about DeepSeek and China model, and other competitors is just stealing the latest version. So of course they need to keep it close, and they can't open source it directly. Even Elon Musk can do that. So,
but why is it better? What is it that what for you? Have you tried it?
Yes, I did.
What was the aha moment for you?
Well, that it can do so much more complex things. It has a really, really big context window. So it's 1 million tokens today, which is bigger than most others. And it will soon have 2 million. And what that means is it can do some other tasks that others can't. I saw some other people that were playing around with this, and they were looking into coding actually, and what it could generate in a single 0-shot prompt to do. So someone asked it, do a flight simulator. Like, what? Can you ask it in a single prompt, 1 shot to do a flight simulator? And yes, they could. You could have a game, you could interact with the steer of a plane through some kind of virtual environment, and it worked in a single prompt. Someone said, generate simulator for this kind of Rubik's Cube. And that's the person that tried it with ChatGPT and Claude and others and DeepSeek, and it never got that to work. But with this one, they could have the simulator of Rubik's Cube. You could see a 3D representation of it. You could ask it to scramble the cube, and it actually kept the colors of each cube like stable. Other models have just messed it up, and when it tried to scramble the cube, it didn't work. But then you could ask it to solve it. And it actually solved. First, it's 4 times 4 cube, and it worked. Then it tried, okay, but let's 10x10 cube, and it could scramble it, and just keeping all the colors intact when scrambling the functionalities it is hard of the cube, itself. But then solving a 10x cube, and it did that as well. It took a long time for it, but it did. That's insane in some way. And of course, the normal do a snake game, yeah, of course, but it could do a snake game with power-ups and much more visual appealing kind of presentation.
And why is this useful or practical for us? So for me, why should I now switch to this? Or, in what way do you think this helps me where I'm right now? Or it doesn't even, I don't even need this. If we take
this kind of scale that we're thinking about here, like 1-hour tasks, how long would it take to create a flight simulator? I mean, it's certainly more than an hour. If you were to build a Rubik's Cube simulator, of course, it would take much longer than that. And I think, with having this kind of long context, and then also having this kind of amazing ability to write in a humanly appealing way, but then also writing code that works in 1 shot in a super accurate way is on a level that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, and if we now take this, we're not saying shit is going to work. We're not saying we don't need software engineers and all that, but everything is getting better. That's the reality. How do you interpret the world when you see new models? I mean, because this is now an example of something that maybe pushed this one more step, another 7 months.
Yeah, I mean,
how do you relate to that? What's the deeper implication that you are thinking about when you think about this?
Right. I mean, yes, I do believe that we are seeing rapid growth when it comes to capabilities. I think also at the same time that we see that it is hard to implement, it's hard to generate the value, it's hard to generate kind of making use of these things.
Exactly.
Because reality is messy. I mean, we have organizations and we have companies and we have things in place which is not currently lending itself perfectly to integrate, to just click in the next model and everything will be like 10% more efficient. So it's both things that we will have like crazy capabilities, but it will probably take some time before we realize them because it will take time to integrate them in the current setup that we have.
But this to me, now in my home turf. I don't think the old model of organizing and the old model of setting up an enterprise lends itself to unlock this value or this potential. I think the underlying fundament of world model, how an enterprise works, needs to be rethought in this context. That is my fundamental belief. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, they have been talking about this. Well, will this type of technology make it possible for like a single person to set up $1 billion company?
Exactly. That's
I mean, with a little bit of legal and a little bit of, software development and testing and front end and commercial and like everything. Could you like boil it down so it's just one person controlling a lot of agents and then generating the value? Because that person's vision and that person's kind of drive is so crisp that the only thing holding that person back is how many agents she or he can
Do you
deploy.
believe in that vision? Do you think it's a really interesting thought experiment, by the way? But is it realizable?
I think it is realizable, but maybe for a very narrow set of type of businesses. I mean, I don't think that like a single person can spin up factories, because factories inherently requires a lot of kind of construction in the real world.
Physical assets.
It's
a different story, maybe.
Let's perhaps get back to the future, and if we will have single-person unicorns in the future. We've talked a bit about that before, but
we even someone used stretched it. Oh, what about 0-person unicorn?
I just like Goran. I'm sure. Do you have a news, or should we?
I don't have any positive ones.
Before you do, I'd just like to add one more. I mean, just yesterday they in ChatGPT released a new image generator, and
yeah, let's talk about that one a little bit.
Because I think the big thing with that, besides being able to generate amazingly good images, surprisingly slow. It takes like a minute, so it's much slower than normal image generators, but it's amazingly good, of course, better than anything else. But what I think is strange is you are free to upload any image of myself, or even ask something to take Elon Musk and putting him on a horse with a gun shooting people, and it will do so. And it doesn't have any guardrails. Look, Goran is together with Elon Musk here.
Okay, so the new image generator that you are talking about, is it part of the 4.0 family?
Yeah. So it's actually the first one that is natively in the same model. So it's a part of 4.0.
So I don't need to do anything else than 4.0. So by using my normal 4.0, I actually get access to this. Yeah. I don't need to worry about it.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
What about video?
You have actually, if you look at it here, there's Sora.
There's Sora. You know what I was doing earlier this morning? It was a little bit in order to prepare for this presentation, but I did it for fun. In the Data Innovation Summit, we have the web app, the event app, Agorify. And in the Agorify app, it's a nice thing to upload your 1 minute who are Darax, So of course I'm going to do that AI. So I've done 2 ads today, like using then if you scroll down in ChatGPT, you get to the video. There's another way of doing it. It's not Sora. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you click on the top banner of and then you select which model to use, then you can get to the video model. I was playing around with that one. If you click there and you go down, further down, I don't know which one to use. If you would build a video and advertising, which model would you use? Because I have.
That's all right. In any case, I don't think we need to go into that, but I think it's surprising that they don't have any guardrails. I mean, isn't this? It doesn't open up for fake, news in an insane. Or what are you thinking, Magnus, about this?
I guess it does. I mean, there were a lot of discussion before the presidential election in the US that how much will kind of fake news and AI-generated stuff affect people's opinion. And I guess maybe because they felt that, well, it didn't have that large effect. There were like 1 or 2 instances of someone creating the voice of Biden calling people up. Yeah. But maybe they have come to the conclusion that people are savvy enough to kind of see the difference. I mean, the models still, they do have a little bit of telltale. If you go back to the Elon Musk one, I would think that I would be able to judge that it was kind of.
Would you really?
Yeah, I think so. It's good. It's really, really cool and good.
I think most people will be fooled by it, but I do think that they have some technique, watermarking technique or something to make it possible to always see that it has been generated at least.
So what is interesting is that no matter how good quality picture you have and you say it to replicate it, it will never, ever be very, very, very close to what you're uploading. So it's good, but you can see it.
Most people, I don't think, can see it.
I
think
you
you
will
can
not
see
see it,
this.
but it doesn't enable you to have like a genuine picture of myself. You can see the nose is bigger and etc. and all these other things. See, it's me, but it's not me, right? So that is the thing. So.
But other people won't see that. I think it looked like you.
But I have a doppelganger as well in the world. That doesn't mean that it's me.
No, I think you made a good point, Magnus, that people, I think, now are expecting that there are a lot of fake images and you can trust images and it's super easy to generate these and anyone can do it.
It's not you. It's super close, and you can see this. This is a fake image of Goran. I can see that. But is that Goran? Of course, no. It's an American version of Goran. It's an American doppelganger.
What do you think, Magnus?
Yeah, there's another thing that comes to mind. I mean, a thing that has been kind of consistent over the last year and a half is that a lot of people working at OpenAI who worked on safety and security have left the company. Some of them have made public statements about that they were not happy about the state of safety and security and risk within the company. And maybe this is just an example of, well, the company has chosen to take a more or less risk-averse side of releasing stuff. Just try it out and see what happens.
Very good point.
But and then we get to the point, where we have talked about it in the other angle. Can you really regulate stuff that is so fast-moving without actually getting examples? And when and how do you regulate this shit? It's really hard, right? I mean, like, we had a conversation with people from RISE where we did the example, like, when we go in a regulator on other industries, or we've done air traffic or whatever, or even electricity, it's a very clear frame of what you're regulating, and it's a fairly fixed thing you are thinking and looking at and trying to regulate. And here now we have something where the productivity frontier or the innovation frontier is logarithmically doubling in capability every 7 months. So how can you regulate in front of that? It is impossible.
Perhaps we should have a topic about this, because we did speak a bit about the open source impact potentially on the safety of these kind of models in the future. But still, I think we all agree that some kind of guardrail should be at least try to be put in place so people can't ask it to build a bomb. Right?
Yeah, I'm not saying...
What do you think? Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking like this. When I read papers, like research papers about capabilities of models, a thing that strikes me is that when you actually read the paper, you quite often see that the research was done on ancient models. I read a paper the other day that was like, oh, this was kind of impressive. Oh, it was GPT 3.5. And the reason for that is that the pipeline for doing the research, collecting the data, writing the paper is so long that it doesn't keep up with the output of the models.
Wow.
Our legal system for sure take much, much, much longer than like the output of models. So yeah,
shouldn't the tech giants and the AI labs still try to have, be proactive here and not let abuse to be too simplistic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite sure, absolutely. I mean, the tech giants have so much power now to control this type of technology moving so fast. So yeah, there's a huge responsibility for them to act in a responsible way.
But the bottom line is the productivity frontier now is clearly at the pace with the old world view of how you organize things.
Yes.
If it's regulation, if it's enterprise, doesn't keep up. So we need to find other. It's not that we need to abandon it, but we need to rethink, reimagine how this is done, and because in reality, when you have a regulatory operating model that doesn't keep up with the productivity frontier, that means that if you are on the cutting edge of innovation, you are making up the rules. So you need to decide, because there is no regulatory framework that works in relation to what you're doing, and that is a complete failure of the regulators in relation to trying to impose the old world model on these guys. It doesn't work. It will never work.
No, exactly. And if the scaling will continue, then I mean, it will be a larger and larger gap, meaning that we need to innovate and understand how to do regulation faster.
To innovate regulation.
Yes.
Period.
I mean, I think it's too simplistic view, I think, to say that. I think, we can remove the regulation from the equation and still say, how can we keep use of AI safe in the future? And I think, all the tech giants and the providers of the latest AI models wants to do that. The question is really, how can we do that? And regulation is one thing, but I think no one really wants to be coming to the point when someone has developed the next coronavirus and they say, we used ChatGPT to do it. That is not something that I don't think even OpenAI wants to be happening. And I think the question is then, what do you do? And I'm a bit surprised with the the GPT 4.5 release, and especially the 4.0 and the image generator, because they seem to simply remove the guardrails.
But it's interesting. Some almost said, we've been on the wrong side of open source.
Yeah.
Which is completely different topics. But if you look at the macro perspective here, I mean, like he's releasing stuff. It's not open source, but the fundamental underlying philosophy: what should we guard? How should we guard it? Are we not going to guard our shit because they're going to do it open source anyway? Yeah. So something is happening
here. That is
here.
actually where he was speaking about. Perhaps not so much about open sourcing, but instead releasing the guardrails.
Exactly. So right? I was thinking like, what was he really trying to say? We're going to go open source, or was he saying like, fuck it, everybody else is going to do it open source, so why should I care?
Yeah, could be.
I mean, like, so what was the underlying message here when he said that? Who knows, right? Who knows?
Perhaps we can go to this topic right now. I mean, if we then, we know we have closed models today, and I think every kind of, at least Western tech giant, is closing the latest models. Grok is, even them. Meta is the only one that is not, well, no, I don't think, but at least Google, of course, is doing it, and OpenAI is doing it. But then, at some point there will be an open source model, and they can be easily fine-tuned to remove adding guardrails if you want to. And then we have DeepSeek that simply did that. So if we take this, Magnus, what do you think? Should we open source the latest kind of models, since they may be soon available anyway? Or what are you thinking about open sourcing models and the impact on safety?
Oh, man, that's such a tricky and big question. I mean, on the one hand, there are like several angles to this one, right? Mm-hmm. On the one hand, you have the kind of risk from a fundamental risk point of view, like could this one be used to create bioweapons and stuff like that? Mm. So that is a risk that I would rather not take. That will kind of push me towards, wait a bit with open source. On the other hand, we have talked about the kind of aggregation of power of the people who own the models. Exactly. That also strikes me as something that I'm not super duper comfortable with, that push me towards, it should be open source so everyone can have it.
Inclusivity is the number one game. But like, you can argue this really extreme. But like Pierre, he's one of the podcast guests, he was really on that side. This is just a narrative of the people that right now is in power that wants to further their divide for their commercial interests. Good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. And where he says like there's only one way, and that is complete open source in relation to minimizing the AI divide, and then we need to work on safety in other ways.
As long as there is at least a theoretical possibility for each of the major risks to have development of defensive capabilities equally fast or equally effective. I'm not sure if that is true when it comes to, for example, bioweapons. I mean, what will take shortest time to create the bioweapon or to create the mitigation for the bioweapon? Well, I'm not an expert in bioweapons, but
I see where you're going.
Well, if we phrase it like this, then we can also think from a practical point of view. If we do believe, I mean, GPT 4.5 is rumored about 20 trillion parameters or something, super big. No one can really run it unless you have lots of money. Then perhaps in the future, they will continue to be more and more expensive to run. If you take I guess Gemini 2.5, it seems to reason a lot. You can see how it reasons a lot. And that's really expensive to just do this kind of inference time compute that they are doing, and probably a big model as well. So once again, since we add the reasoning part of it, it will be more expensive to run it, not just the scale, but actually the reasoning part will add costs to it to a large extent. So in some sense, the biggest frontier models will be really expensive. So it will be a few players in the world that probably can run the best ones, even in 5 years, perhaps. Would you agree with that? So it would be like a few selected players in the world that will have access to the
compute,
to the top like frontier models. That is even 10 times better than this one, or ours that we have today.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
And then it doesn't really matter if it's open source or not, because no one can run them anyway. I mean, they don't have the money to do it. So then I think the open source argument doesn't really hold anyway.
But I think when we talked about this in our Christmas episode, where we were, what's trending and what are we predicting, and the always the bipolar conversation, open source versus closed, and we came kind of up to, well, maybe there will be a extreme frontier models, and almost like you say, it doesn't matter if they're closed or not. And then what we really should aim for as a society is a shitload of more application-centric or narrow or open source. We talked about the frontier models, which were from all kinds of practicality. Their useful application is to distill out useful applications.
Well, that's another question. I mean, I think,
I guess
we have said a number of times
it
that it will be levels or hierarchy of models out there. Some of them will be the super expensive frontier models. You can't really use them for practical purposes because it's too expensive to put in production anyway. So you will have some kind of specialized model that is used for your data, for your purpose in your application, and they will be smaller and more, cheaper to run. So I think that will be clear, that will be a huge, like millions of these kind of more specific models that you can run from a practical point of view. But still, going back to the original question about, the few selected frontier models, it's kind of disturbing to think that it will be only a very few set of actors that will have access to them in the future.
You have to put a lot of faith in the people who control those organizations, that they're acting on the good of whole mankind.
Yeah.
But this is one, and the other one is the fundamental cultural values of these models. I mean, like we see it already now, an Americanized language is a more consumerism language than maybe the Nordics or whatever. So we fundamentally also see a dilution of culture. That everything gets based on the model, the frontier model worldview. I mean, like that's also problematic to some degree, or maybe not, but maybe it drives a trajectory that is that Nordic values, is that sort of Swedish values? I don't know. We talked with the Love Börjesson, who's heading up Kobe Lab. And he's really talking passionately about the sovereignty around language and the importance of that. If you believe that the values that we want to also have in our society, what is our values? That's a tricky one.
Yes,
it's a super tricky one. And then once again, open source may be not a bad idea.
Well, I don't think the tech giants will do it simply from a commercial point of view, because it's so easy to distill and copy it if you show everything. So they don't want a repeat of DeepSeek, I guess.
But then we have the whole idea that no one is doing open source for the kindness to humanity. So we have the Meta. Why do they do open source? Well, because their core business model and how they make money is on another product where their business model improves when they have a larger community of developers developing in their context. This is vastly different to OpenAI, where the model is the core value proposition.
But even if Meta were to do like a 10 times larger model, no one would be able to run it anyway. It will be too expensive there as well. Yeah. So even for them, it wouldn't make sense in the long run, I don't think.
I can't fault that argument.
Okay, time is flying away here. Before we get more into philosophical topics and if AI have feelings and intent or not, and I'm looking forward to hear your thoughts about that. But I'd just like to perhaps hear some advice from you, Magnus. If someone now is interested in learning, how to be more of a prompting expert, what should they do? Do you have? You can listen to yourself. You have some pod articles that you've written, and they could read that. But what would be your advice for people that want to improve their skills?
embrace the use of AI. I mean, the AI is so flexible, so it can help you answer whatever question you want. And one of the questions that you might have is, how do I become a better prompter? Or help me write a prompt for solving this thing? Or what should I think of when asking you about help me solving this, that, and the other?
So the teacher is the AI as well there?
Yes, absolutely.
This is the meta perspective on everything, right? So we don't be scared, just get stuck in, and if you don't know what to do, ask it.
Yes.
If you want to be better at prompting, prompt it.
Right?
It's meta prompting.
Meta prompting. I love it.
It's prompting all the way down.
What do you do to keep on the cutting edge, so to speak, in your techniques? Do you have a favorite way to keep your skills up to date?
I'm a big podcast listener, so I listen to a bunch of podcasts. I have a very curated list on X Twitter with AI people saying stuff. I tend to keep an eye on specific people who release stuff. So Ethan Mollick has a very good blog. Of course, Andrej Karpathy has a wonderful YouTube channel, and he released a video that was just excellent overview of how I use LLMs. Really, really good.
That was 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That was almost newsworthy in itself.
It was so good. I mean, that man, not only is he, of course, some kind of genius given the things he have built, but the way he can communicate also on a general, not necessarily technical level, that's really impressive. And just for free putting it on YouTube. I mean, that's awesome.
He could earn so much money if he wanted
legend,
to, but he just put it out there for free.
Hardcore legend.
Okay. I actually would like to speak about autonomous driving as well. But before that, you opened the topic about feelings and intent. And do you see some kind of embryo in ChatGPT today that it does have feelings?
We are at a very weird place because I have not seen anything that would make me believe that the AI has feelings. But I have seen several occasions where the AI have made me feel different type of things, which is kind of weird. I had this, one of the prompts I run from time to time is this classical one, given everything you know about me, please roast me and don't hold back. And if you used ChatGPT and you have used the memory feature, it will have a lot of things, the stupid things you have asked about. And it can, the way, when I asked this the last time, it gave an output that was funny, so I kind of laughed, and I felt a little bit bad because it was also true, and it really found like my weak points and poked them. And then after like laughing and feeling a bit bad about myself, I said, okay, now you have to help me pick up the pieces, make me feel good about myself. And the output it gave me, I know what these things are. It's big matrix multiplication. There's no living thing, and yet
is the human brain different?
Yeah, maybe not, but I think that there's more similarities between me, my cat, and a tree, and the ChatGPT is more similar to like your computer that you have in front of you. So maybe not in the limit that there's a difference, but the output I got to make me feel better, I felt seen. And that was a really weird feeling, given that I fundamentally think that this thing is not conscious, it's not living, it cannot observe in any meaningful way. And yet I felt very happy. And I remember a tweet from Sam Altman a while back where he said that I think we're in a weird state because I think we will have AIs with the capability to lie and emotional manipulate people way before we have super intelligence. And I think we're on the track on that one.
Wasn't that one of the big points with GPT 4.5, that the EQ, not the IQ, but the EQ, the ability to understand human feelings, was so much better than before?
Yeah.
So at least it has the ability to understand feelings. Would you say that?
No, I think it has the ability to generate stuff that will make... Man, it really comes down to the definitions here.
Yeah, what's your definition of feeling? Do you have one?
Short answer, no.
No, but
Such a simple question.
It is hard word, anthropomorphize. What's anthropomorph?
Yeah, anthropomorphize, yes.
We are doing it all the time, right? But if you, and then we go down the path. It's old programming. It's just a neural network, and it doesn't have any feelings. But then you can flip that question anytime. Like, well, is your brain different? Is our brain really different?
But I mean,
but the problem is that we are on the inside, so we have feelings because we can understand a conscious thought without looking at the exact neuron that created it. But of course, we have no way of looking into someone else. Do you have feelings? No, you're a robot, Anders. You are an alien. You're a robot. Because I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's of course an unsolved problem so far, and you can do the same thing with the biological stack. Like, do humans have consciousness and feeling? Yeah, I don't think anyone doubt that.
At least when we're awake, but when we are asleep, we're not.
Dogs, cats, mice, small birds, worms, bacteria. I mean,
where do we draw the line, right?
Exactly.
And someone would argue you can have a good relationship with your dog, right? So dogs, then okay, they have consciousness.
But there are these kind of philosophical questions about, what does consciousness mean? In a most simplistic way, it means the ability to have some feeling and awareness. Then you can ask, like, a thermometer that can measure the temperature in a room. It has some kind of awareness of the temperature.
Sure.
With the mercury, going up and down. It has, and a feeling is in the most simplistic way, some kind of state that you have. That you have, currently you're angry or you're happy, or you are in a certain state in your mind. And then a thermometer potentially is in a certain state. It's currently this kind of level of thermometer, or the temperature.
The mercury is at this level. Yeah.
So then you could argue that the thermometer potentially has consciousness, which I think no one would agree it's true. Right?
Well, I mean, you have this school of philosophy called panpsychism, where they say that everything is conscious when electron is conscious in a very limited, very specific way, but...
We used that terminology 3 years ago. We would try to, in conversation like that, and we said, like we talk about narrow AI and general AI, can we talk about narrow consciousness? You remember that?
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
In any case, I think, there are levels potentially. You can define feelings in whatever way you can, but if you define it a very narrow way, as we said before, you can potentially argue that I think you need to add, besides having feeling and awareness, you need to have some kind of level of reasoning as well before being called conscious. Because at least for humans, I think it's easy to define when a human is conscious or not. If you're conscious, you can actually observe the world to have around it. You can get some kind of feeling of it, and you can reason about it. If you're asleep, you're not. You can't really perceive what's happening around it, so you're not aware what's happening. Therefore, you're not conscious, right? So it's very easy to decide what the human is when it's conscious.
But can you have consciousness without the fundamental world model and without the fundamental view of... we talked about these different dimensions. So like, okay, we have a lot knowledge, right? We have knowledge, and we have more advanced knowledge. So we can even... it's silent, it's dead until you prompt it and then it responds. But it's not online. So can you have consciousness when it's not online and it doesn't have a world model?
But then we come into self-driving cars, and perhaps it's, with a person from Scania, this would be fun exercise as well. So let's forget about the thermometer, but speak about the Scania truck that is potentially autonomous. And you have that, right?
Yeah, sure.
That even passed the driving exam, didn't it? I think Scania had some example of that, if I'm not mistaken. The Swedish,
maybe, yeah.
Anyway, you have trucks that can drive without a human behind it, right? And then the question is, can it perceive the world around it? Yeah, of course. Can it reason about what? Can it reason? Yes, to some extent, perhaps. Can it take action? Yes, certainly, right? Then the big question is, does it have feelings? And what do you think there? Does your Scania trucks have feelings?
I mean, given that I'm in the camp that I don't believe that even the most advanced LLM currently have feelings, I would say no, I don't think that our autonomous trucks have feelings.
Yeah. But let you take the opposite argument for the fun of it. Because if we believe in a definition as narrow consciousness, so we can organize a space where we can define feelings in relation to an object. So what would be feelings for a truck? It would be: do I feel healthy? Do I have pain in my legs? So as a human being, I have a bad knee. I can't run anymore.
It's winter. It's super cold. My engine is not feeling well. I can't really start it.
Oh, I'm cold. I'm cold
state.
today. So I need to put on my heater.
Okay.
I have a feeling now that I need to heat myself up.
Okay, I guess what it basically comes down to is that feelings and consciousness, and for that matter life, are so ill-defined concepts.
Yes.
So you just have to pick whatever definition you want,
Yes.
and if it fits a truck, then it fits a truck. Then a truck is alive and conscious.
This is what we boil it down to. So the exactly this. So as long as you're defining and framing and giving a definition of what the truck should feel, and you give a world model and a space where it can then react to what the sensors tells it, it has narrow consciousness in this way of reasoning. But is that real consciousness, a la what a human define as, do a truck have a soul? It's unsolvable.
Does human have a soul?
Do we have a soul? Yeah.
I mean, given that consciousness among humans is not either a well understood concept, right? I mean, we have this notion of you're conscious if you do this, but if you sleep, you're not conscious, and if you're dead, you're not conscious.
But my argument, and
It's a question of definitions.
bottom line. But why these definitions are important is that as long as we're staying on some sort of meta philosophical level, is bullshit, right? But as when you start framing it and you define like a narrow consciousness, or maybe we need to use completely different words. So a truck needs to adapt to its environment. And that environment can grow from, only the sensors of the truck. It can grow into the whole transport ecosystem. Oh, I feel empty today. I'm hungry. I want more load. So it's useful to understand that actually you can talk about these topics. Maybe we need to find other words because we are anthropomorphizing way too much on this topic. But I believe this is really relevant in order to understand how we need to build systems.
It could be useful to use terms like this.
Yeah, I'm thinking narrow consciousness is maybe smart.
Are you then morally obliged to always fill up the truck with gasoline, because otherwise you will cause pain to it?
Yeah, maybe.
In the future, perhaps.
In the future, perhaps.
Yep.
A truck with no gas that sits in the yard is not ready to run.
Could be sad.
So it's sad.
Or maybe it prefers that one.
Yeah, but the joke, it just goes to bullshit when we anthropomorphize this. So this is what I'm not aiming to talk about consciousness in the human sense.
But if you think about the Boston Dynamics kind of robots, they had this kind of dog that were running in the woods, and someone was kicking it, and someone was trying to kick it as much as it could, and you can see it struggling to get back on track, and you could feel some emotions for it. I felt that human was nasty to that robot.
Yeah, but the problem is that we end up in a very silly conversation because we are putting human ideas on consciousness, and that's I think this is
I
something
think it will
else.
get mixed up in the future, but we'll see.
Interesting.
Magnus,
Used to hear for
yeah, we're getting very philosophical now. So of course, that's fun sometimes. I think. Magnus, you're also a speaker as well, and an expert in AI. If you were to speak about this kind of philosophical future, some kind of AI first world, if you call it that, what kind of impact do you think it will have? Let's say in 5 years. What do you think our society and people, how will we have changed our lives potentially?
I mean, a dream would of course be to have AI helping and enabling people. I mean, I'm thinking about the potential that it can have in education. Say that you could, in theory, have like a personalized tutor who is completely aligned with your kind of preferences for learning and gathering knowledge.
Understands you perfectly.
Exactly, and knows if you need like short burst of information or long, or if you need a movie, or if you need text, or if you need a song, or if you need like whatever. And that would kind of help all of the students, and I guess in particular those who are not so well suited for the current school system to really, really flourish. That would be awesome. That would be so great.
So it can be good in many sense. Do you fear about some potential abuses as well, or do you? We see a lot of bad things happening around the world. Is that something that you fear potentially?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, given that I feel that the technology is developing really, really quick now, And maybe in the next few years, we will have like radical different and new capabilities coming online. And all of these companies are now local. Many of the companies that are doing this research and doing these products are based in the US. And I mean, I guess we can have a conversation if we feel that the current administration in the US is trustworthy and doing a good job and being a good steward for this type of very powerful technology. I am not. And I can maybe leave it at that. And of course, the geopolitical thing of it, where US and China are kind of rubbing up against each other in so many different domains, and AI is just one of them. Yeah, there are a few things that I worry about.
And if we take recent development in Europe and in Sweden, is that we have to ramp up the defense capabilities significantly, and we're pouring billions and billions of euros into that throughout Europe, much more than the big Invest AI initiative for 200 billions, and much more will be spent in defense capabilities coming years. And of course, AI will be a part of that. Do you have any? It's a difficult question. Feel free to ignore it if you don't. I mean, it's hard to answer it, but. Any thoughts about using AI, which it will be used for defense purposes and potentially offensive purposes in the future? Would you yourself work in a defense cooperation or military situation?
Yeah, right. That's a very good question. And very long part of my life, I had the notion that I would never ever work within defense industry. Like that was kind of, no, I don't want to participate in that type of activity with my brain power. I think that the recent events in Ukraine and kind of the actions of Russia have sort of changed my mind. I see like the people of Ukraine trying very hard to defend themselves for an external aggressor. One which is not really bordering Sweden, but very close to it. No, I mean they're bordering Finland and the Baltic states. So I have spent a lot of time rethinking that particular promise I made to myself to never work within defense industry. But I mean, it's a hypothetical question. I work at Scania, so
yeah. Of course. But we have then. Do we need AI sovereignty or software or cloud sovereignty? Do we need a European stack? Do we need European, because in one way, I think we have a lot of time. There are many arguments, not only commercial, but also geopolitical and also language, values. How do you, what is your take there? Is it, should we go all in on creating our own stack sort of thing? I
think that Europe is currently lacking in control over critical infrastructure when it comes to cloud, when it comes to AI as well. That was maybe less of a problem when the providers of said infrastructure was located in the country that did not threaten explicitly to invade friendly neighbors. But here we are.
Strange world.
I mean, so the strange world is some sort of thing like you never know how the map is redrawn. You can never know that.
No, and I think from that perspective,
that's what we have learned.
Yeah, and from that perspective, I guess it makes sense to have a strong collaboration and a strong defense with your neighbors rather than relying on kind of your geographical neighbors, because presumably you're a little bit more aligned, maybe. But who knows? Maybe Denmark will be a rogue state in like 10 or 20 years. Who knows?
The Danes.
Always the Danes.
Always the Danes. They invaded us most of anyone, I think.
I think we invaded them one or two times as well. So.
Did we invade them or they us? Who won?
Yeah, difficult question.
Difficult question.
But perhaps if we move to even the last question potentially. Oh yeah, you have this kind of... We know AI is coming to war fields as well, of course.
Was this the news that was not fun news, Goran? You said you had news, but there were no fun. This one.
There you go.
Yeah. Let's not go there. It's too depressing to end on that note. But anyway, Magnus, and let me ask you that question first. Do you believe AGI will come?
Yes, I believe AGI will come. We can spend a lot of time defining what AGI is.
Do you have a preferred definition?
No, it's a very vague thing.
If we take, I prefer like Sam Altman's definition, saying AGI will happen when we have AI systems that are equally good as an average coworker. And let me phrase it a bit more clear. If we actually use the terminology of autonomous driving, so for a truck or a car, you can think of it needs to perceive the world, it needs to be able to plan and reason, and then it needs to take action, have a control. So today I think it's very clear that perception is actually very good. So we can build knowledge in these kind of models to an extreme that is much better than most humans, but it's actually much worse when it comes to reasoning and to actually take control and take action, especially in the physical world. In digital world, we're starting to do some progress, but in physical world is still very much lacking compared to humans. But that will change in coming years. And potentially when these kind of three components all started to be on human level, then we will have AI systems that can be equally good as an average coworker, and then potentially we will have AGI. If we just take that kind of definition, do you think that will happen, for example, that we will have AI system that will be equally to an average coworker?
Oh, yeah.
There's there's one more definition on this. This can happen and someone has the ability and so it technically is done, but then we can discuss universal AGI where this is then spread in the world. So there will be a point where this is happening and this can be done, but the regulatory is not there, practically hasn't spread yet. So then you can talk about universal AGI as well, I guess. Will that happen? That's a different trajectory again. Because that means it's...
I guess you're speaking about the societal impact and if organizations have adapted to it. And, and if we have the technical or technological kind of solution, I guess it's just a matter of time before we will have the societal impact, even though it will take some time.
Yeah, I'm just referring to the time scale. I'm just saying if one happens, the other one is probably bound to happen as well. Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, so given that we believe that AGI will come, and I think we all here agree on that, it's just a matter of when. Then we can take two extremes. One extreme is the Terminator, the Matrix, the dystopian kind of future where machines will try to kill us all, and the other one could be the utopian version that you started to speak a bit about. That we have AI that can help humans and augment humans, and we can be so much more educated and knowledgeable, and we can have solved cancer potentially, and we can have solved the climate crisis and energy needs and whatnot. And we live in a world of abundance, as some people call it. So that could be the extreme in the other sense, the utopian kind of version of it. What do you lie between these two extremes? Are you leaning more towards the one or the other, or?
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards medium, but tending on the bad outcome side. I mean, we will still have stuff like, as we discussed, high concentration of power, that will equal high concentration of wealth. I have a hard time looking at the history of mankind to see that any type of development will just make that go away. And I know that some people say that once we have abundance intelligence, then everything is just nice and dandy and everyone will have every need met.
And AI can control other AIs potentially as well.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I like continue. If did you want to spin on it more?
Yeah, no, I guess it's a matter of how do you see human nature, and do you think human nature will fundamentally change given AI, or will it just be more of the same? And look at history. I don't really see that human nature is gearing towards peace, understanding, love, and sharing of stuff.
It seems to go in the other direction right now, right?
And the comment, one of the interesting answers, that I think goes in the same trajectory as what you are referring to. I think it was Sverker Jansson, heading up AI Excellence Center in RISE. He looked at us and said, "Of course, we will have both. We have poverty in some parts of the world, and we have extreme abundance in other parts of the world. Why will that change?" And I thought that was fairly deep, because human nature will take us in some way. It will be better, but we will have to, how to fight the AI divide, so to speak. That is maybe the number one question that shifts where this medium ends up. How big is the, It's both. But
we've been asking this question for I think 100 times now, and I think what's unique with your answer, and I think very profound as well, is really one of the main concerns is that AI will cause concentration of power, and that is hard to manage. And we are seeing that year after year, and already today, it's an extreme concentration of power to some few companies and even a few set of people these days. And as people say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
But that's it's interesting. We started this pod in the pandemic because we felt we need to start demystifying AI, and we were coining the AI divide. Coining, I don't know. The digital divide has been discussed, but we saw it even bigger, and we said this AI divide, which is essentially what you're talking about with the concentration of power. That's why my view of the most important job we can do is not to worry so much about what the best are doing, but to make damn sure everybody else is fucking lifting their game. I think that's we can't judge ones for being brilliant to be brilliant. We need to work on ourselves to step up. So whatever that means. But the AI divide is, I said sometimes, do we want the Scanias of the world to be disrupted by someone else, or do we want Scanias of the world to be disrupted from within? I think the societal impact of always disruption from someone else and from some very few is much worse than hardcore disruption from within the Swedish companies, as an example. I don't know.
And one thing I should say is that even though I might be a little bit pessimistic, maybe due to my personality or whatever, I feel that I'm kind of lacking the clear definition and outlining what the optimal good future with AI would look like. I mean, I read this blog post by AIAW, Machines of Loving Grace, and I keep being frustrated by why are not more tech leaders trying to identify what is a good outcome and then show how we will get to it. There's quite a lot of talk about, we will have abundance and everything will be fine. How does that look like? What do we need to do to get there? I mean, apart from not regulating you guys. And I feel that there's very few people talking about that. So that would be helpful as well.
And we're talking about this stuff, what do you say, on a stupidly philosophical level, instead of trying to break the problem down into its objective functions and into its capabilities, like you would do in any system.
Yes.
And we are not. We continue to fluff around. That is frustrating. I fully agree with that.
I'm a really good and profound
really perceptive
answer,
and a really good observation.
With that, thank you so much, Magnus Gille, for coming here, giving all your knowledge to us, or at least a small part of it, and your very interesting comments and philosophical discussions here. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.